When you discovered the law of attraction, you started to believe anything was possible. Life got better, much better. Now you want more, but it's not working. That's where the Manifest It Now show comes in. If you've been waiting for someone who can teach you the practical application to manifest quicker and easier while having more, turn the volume up, because the dynamic duo, Cassie Parks and Ginny Gain, are ready to teach you how to live the law of attraction like they do. It's time to laugh and learn.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Manifest It Now. I'm here with Cassie Parks.
And I'm here with Ginny Gain.
And our topic today for you is I just practiced it. It's like, you know, when you're speaking and you're supposed to say something really specific and then your mind just goes blank and it's not there. That's what happened, guys. But our topic for today is how when you grow, what is right for you changes. So the tools or the things that you are using to get one place doesn't always mean those are the right things for you as you're growing and evolving on your path.
And I think this is a key. I know I've seen it happen where and we'll talk a little bit, like I have to help my clients through this as we up level who they're, as they're growing. But it's a place where I see new people who come into my world, or people who are, they keep doing the same things, but there is a time when those need to become upgraded. And I think it's one of the things that's really missed in LOA. And if you feel like you're stuck, might be one of the reasons why you feel like that, because in some ways you are, and you're really just stuck in perspective, I would call it, or Yeah,
awesome. What are you excited about, Cass?
Oh man, everything. It is summer. We inflated one of the big sprinklers yesterday, so there's a 6-foot rainbow floating around in the pool.
Too funny.
I know, it's so fun. And I love the way, like, it's just being created, like, so fun, and lots of people. I don't know if I said this, but I do want to talk about, like, the next time we talk about sort of setting an intention and letting go. I wanted the pool to feel like a resort, and it was just like, someday I want a beautiful wall, like when you're at a resort, and I want it to feel like when I was at the Four Seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very like someday, and then all of a sudden we have this very beautiful wall, and we have this idea to add the umbrellas to it, which is part of the resort feel, and people just keep coming. They're like, it feels like a resort. I'm like, great.
The picture looks like one for sure. It gets that feel. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I haven't seen it with the rainbow yet, though.
I know. I'm sending you the rainbow, like, driving itself around the pool later.
Oh my
goodness. Like, last night it was so windy, and we were like, went outside, and it's just like, making its own path. It was super fun.
That's funny.
What are you excited about?
I feel excited and like super proud. So this past week was the first. I know, it was the first week. So Live Your Truth is growing, and we're opening up and adding some coaches, and 2 women that have worked with me for a couple years are starting to take over some of the calls, and it's so exciting. It is so, like, I was there and watching the calls for the first couple times, and it was like, oh my gosh, my babies are like taking, spreading their wings and flying away. And it was such a beautiful experience for me to see them doing that. And also the women in the group, like who they are being. It's hard to say, but it's a different perspective. When I'm in coach mode, I'm coaching. And then so stepping back and watching how they're talking to each other, how they're sharing what's going on and the work that they're doing, I felt so proud of all of them. And so it was really exciting to see that, to witness that, and also to be having this experience as like the next level in my business. So that feels really cool.
That's awesome. And what is even more awesome is when I have a client, we just had this whole big shift about being proud. Mm-hmm. And so I love that when this episode is going to come out, she's going to have this great evidence of, like, this amazing example of pride and being proud of what you do and how you're changing the world. So I got super excited when I heard you say it. When you were like, I am so proud. I was like, yes.
I wondered why you got so excited about that. That's funny. All right, so where do you want to get started with our topic?
So I want to, where do I want to start? I want to start by saying something very clearly, because I think we often will say, and I don't remember if I said it in an interview or I was just telling you, but like I got interviewed a couple of months ago and somebody said, like, what do you think someone should do when they're like bored with their practice, I think was the question, or do people need to change up? And my answer was, and I think this is true for both of us, like scripting is my go-to. Scripting in my future self, my process, I've been doing it for 6 years and it always works. And so that for me always stays the same, but there are other things that have to get up leveled, and there are things that get up leveled along our way. So if you've heard us say like we do the same thing, like that's true, but what we're going to talk about is sort of this evolution of what we think we need to do or what we think it looks like to grow. That's what I want to say. Do you have anything to add to that at the beginning?
Well, I like that a lot, that thinking about it in this way, that like you have the core, I'm going to say practice of what aligns you most, or another way, keeps you connected to where you're going. Yeah. And I think once you identify the core of your intention, which is that to keep you aligned and connected to your vision, there's a number of ways to do that. So that's the one thing that stays consistent. And there's a number of tools that you can use that. And when Cassie says she's been scripting for 6 years, I don't know, but I can pretty guarantee that scripting has changed, has like grown in depth. And that's what we mean by like the same thing won't always work for you, because as you grow, you need to also deepen your tools or how you're using your tools. So scripting about one thing 1 year, and then Cassie goes to a whole new place and she's scripting the same thing, but in a different way or at a different level. And that's, I think, what we're talking about, is expanding the tools you're using to complement your growth.
And you said a very important word, because it has gotten deeper, right? There was a point where I was like, I literally was like, this needs to be deeper. How do I make it deeper?
Yeah.
And now I have a process, so that kind of happens automatically. But what we're talking about is that depth, and depth doesn't have to mean doing more.
Yes.
Or it doesn't
have to be doing more, like more things, more different things, or more of the same thing.
Yeah. Often it means something like going slower.
So often.
Right?
So often, like becoming more present, slowing down, more space.
Yeah. Going slower even through like the work. Right? So for me, like in my work, that's assignments, or going slower through a scripting, not trying to get through like so much of what you want to do, but being deeper and slower, meaning like, I only got through like breakfast. Yeah. But it was so detailed and juicy because the depth of the experience was there, not just the stuff. And so that depth can often be slower. It can often mean depth is often like letting go. It's deeper in a places that we can let go. Again, slower, like more stillness, like that depth often becomes sometimes greater detail. It can become feeling more, like Jenny said, it's more present. So depth isn't like doing more of a thing.
Yeah. I noticed this as we were talking about this, I'm realizing this is what happens as like I'm working with clients, moving through weeks by weeks. And, the first list of everything I want is everything, right? And it often changes like so many things, and that's amazing. But what comes with the depth is actually like the real part, like what's under there. And it can come down to a few things. And it's like, what I really want is this. And the feeling of that is so much more real, versus all the things they want. And it shows up too in when we're talking about some of the stuff I do is getting to, highlight what's going well and talk about what you're appreciating, things like that. And the way someone writes and shares what they're experiencing deepens as you become more aligned, as you become more in tune with where you're going, who you are. And that's what we're talking about here too. So it could be like, go.
I just want to give an example because I think you brought up a great example, and I have a couple examples. But I want to highlight this, right? So one of the things to show people what we're talking about and how to catch it in your own self is if in the beginning you're like, oh, I used to want all of these things, but now your like list of what do you want has in some ways shrunk. And you're like, what am I doing wrong? I have to ask for all these things in order to get all these things, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that is the perfect example of what you did in the beginning to get you to one spot isn't necessary. Like you do the same thing, like you over and over, like, what do I want next? What do I want to create? Who do I want to be? But the list doesn't have to still be 100 things deep, right? It doesn't have to. But so often people get caught in, if my list isn't 100, I must be doing it wrong now. I have to go back and find 100 things. No, the depth is maybe only having 5 things.
Mm-hmm. Or if you have that feeling of like, same thing. Well, I don't really want a lot of things, and starting to ask yourself, well, what do I want then? Well, what do I want? Because I have to know what I want in order to get it. And I would trust that, like that's one of these times, take a step back and say that it's in me. I already have identified a million things I want, and now I'm here. What if this is progress? What if this is movement forward? That I'm like, I really care about this 1 or 2 or 5 things that are really important to me. And I can trust that that's what's meant for me now. And that's going to lead my path.
Mm-hmm. Because going back and trying to create that big list and forcing that big list, because that's what's worked in the past, is going backwards. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't see it. Do you have another example? I have one, but do you have another example?
No,
of
go for it.
Something that often happens. So I just want people to be able to hear like what we're talking about. So another one was feeling the feelings, and it happened with a client the other day, and she's like, some stuff is coming up and I like need to feel it, and I can't remember what she said after, but through the course of the conversation it was like, yeah, like you had to learn to feel, and it had to be sort of this big thing, and it took over a lot because you had put off feeling for so long that when you felt something, it took a while, and it took a lot of energy, and it took really looking at it because there were lots of parts because you hadn't felt anything of it, right? Mm-hmm. But now as things come up, it doesn't have to be, it's not going to be as big of a thing generally when a little thing comes up from the past or a little thing comes up that needs to be felt as you grow, because you've learned how to feel and you're not constantly shutting things down. So you're feeling on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis, mm-hmm. which is allowing those emotions to flow through instead of build up. Mm-hmm. But she was, I need to let this come up and be this big thing. Mm-hmm. And then really the lesson is like, no, like you're doing this all the time. So we don't have to go back and have these big feeling things anymore because we feel in this moment-to-moment situation.
Yeah, because she stepped into the beingness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had another example. One of my clients had, wanted to create more ease and flow in her life. And so she was activating those feelings in her life. And at the beginning, like anything, it takes that conscious effort. And I think this is where we get caught up, is because we know that it took conscious effort. So she did that, mm-hmm. practiced that. She started feeling it and then realized like, hey, this isn't as much work anymore. And because it was the idea that the work or the effort got me here, there was this underlying, well, I have to keep working then to keep moving forward. And that's not what's happened. So the ease and the flow has become natural to her. It's become the natural response. And so her question really was like, can it really be this easy? And I was like, 100%, because it's become your natural response now. It's who you are. Mm-hmm. You're in that beingness. You don't have to go try to get there because it's already there. Now life can respond to that consistent vibration versus trying to activate in order to feel it, kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. And I've had that recently with a client, right? It's like, oh, but I need to be activating that feeling all the time. It's like, no, it's become part of you. Yes. Like it happens naturally. We do it in the beginning because we're shifting and changing. And I will say, like, on the ease thing, like that is constantly what growth and depth, that's a constant theme for me, is like, what else can I let go of? What, like, how else can I let ease, right? Because once you let go and things get easier, you're open to what else can even be easier. So often for me, depth is doing less and less.
I know, it's really funny. It is so, like, that's my experience as well, is because to go deeper, you need more space. So you can't keep filling the space with stuff. And so that's, I think, part of what's underlying the actual practicality of why we're not inspired to do some things all the time, or what comes after efforting. And I just want to highlight too, to make sure that we communicated it, is that it's efforting at the beginning, and that's fine. It's work to change this stuff, guys. And then gradually, eventually, it gets easier and easier, and then it becomes your natural way of being. So if you catch yourself in that place of like, is this too easy, or I haven't worked at this in a while, don't go back and think, well, I need to, or like I should be working at my manifesting. I get this so much, is like, now that people are in the flow, it's like, but I'm not like doing anything, Ginny. And I'm like, yes, you are. Like, you're doing it perfectly. Keep going and following that. And like, talking about the path of growth, we're always going to be inspired to grow in new levels. You don't have to worry about finding it. It will come when you're ready, and we don't have to go try to effort our way to greater success.
Well, that's the thing, right? The next thing you need to do comes when we stay open and grow. But if you go back to try and do the things, right, which Jenny was saying, like the things, and by things, means the doing too, right? Not getting the things, but also like having like this list of things you have to do.
Yeah.
And when we go backwards and we start to create that, you really are, you're not in that place of moving forward as much. And so if you've ever felt like, oh, I'm stuck, or like it works less, like this could be one of the reasons, is because instead of allowing that space and knowing that you've already, created a lot of what you want, and that momentum is building, and all you have to do is show up and grow when the opportunity presents itself, or choose easy when there's a new opportunity, like a higher level of easy gets presented. That is where it is. So if you've ever felt like, oh, stuck, or like going backwards, or like I don't get as far doing the same things as I used to, that's why, because you're likely shouldn't be doing the same things as you used to.
Yeah. I just had one of the women who took skills camp maybe almost 2 years ago. She's back in the course again, and she's re-going through everything. And her life is like, she's like, everything is great. Like, I love my life.
Yeah.
I'm living my dream life. And I'm like, we were talking about like what success means. And for her, it's like, I just want to get another level of this, and it's happening just by all of this focus. And so that's the same kind of thing. And I want to talk about this and get what are your thoughts, Cass, on the ideas of going back to basics? Because it's like kind of ties in a little bit. Yeah.
It does. I love it. And I want to discuss, so we can make it clear for our listeners too, like what is basics versus the things we think we have to do.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I want to say first, like, I love going back to basics. I see it all the time, because it is basics, because sometimes we just need that reminder. And that's where we see that up level, right? When we're like, oh, what does make me feel good now? And what I love is when an activation list becomes like 30-second activities instead of like, an hour.
10 minutes. Yeah.
Or 10 minutes, it comes full of those. And that was one of the things I noticed the last time I did one. I'm like, oh, all of these really are under 5 minutes, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I love basics because it reminds us, and it also gives us, when we go back to basics, especially if it's something that we've done before. And you have to do it without the judgment, right? Because somebody could say, well, basics is like asking for what you want, right? But then it's honoring what shows up, not thinking it has to be something different. But I love going back to basics because it's one of the ways you can see how far you've come.
Yeah, that's a super fun way to be aware
right?
of where you're at. Yeah, as you go back.
Yeah. It's also when you go back to basics, when you have become more deeper, open, healed, all the things, when you go back through that, you get to see the work differently because you're bringing this person who is already amazing, not striving for anything, just open to more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever I think of this term like back to basics, I always think of my basketball when I was at college, and I had this one coach who was like, he just drilled this home, and it was like every time he led a practice, it was like we did basics, and they were so grounding and so amazing. It's like back to dribbling, back to shooting that stupid layup, left hand side, right hand side, and it was so grounding. And you can see, so if I started dribbling and it felt competent in some way, and then every time we go back to basics, I'm like, this is easier. So just like Cass was talking about with the activation level, this can be a great grounding place for you in LOA, just to give yourself a boost of like, oh yeah, this is easier for me. Like things are moving. Like I've changed a lot. And so let's talk about maybe what some of the back to basics would be versus doing the stuff.
Yeah. So I think if you've gone through any program or you've read a book that you implemented, not just read a book and were like, oh, that's nice, that's great, like tips and stuff, but like implemented the process, I think if you're not working with a coach, back to basics can mean doing that thing over again and looking at it with fresh eye. It's really what you take to it too, right? It's not saying, oh, I've already done this. Or when you look at something and you're like, oh yeah, I've been doing that for years. It's looking at it and going, how can I do more of this now?
Yeah. It's something, so as a business owner, like I go through the same question so many times. Okay, what experience do I want my clients to have? Okay, what's the main message I want to communicate with people? Like how, and I would do this many, many, many times. And I have caught myself saying like, I've done this a million times. And then, but I catch it and I'm like, okay, this time's new, this time's fresh. And I take that much more clarity into it. I take that much more of openness into it because it's different every time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Because you do get that clarity and that openness. Did I answer your original question? Was I supposed to like define the difference between the two? Or what basics were, right?
Yeah. Let's talk more about what the basics are like in LOA.
Oh. The things we talk about every week.
Yeah.
So becoming
Awareness. Right? Yeah.
And awareness when you're at this higher level
is so different.
It is so different, right? It's even almost further back and looking. It's really looking with, so hard to say because no judgment should be no judgment, but it's even less judgment.
Yeah.
Which is hard to explain if you haven't got there, but it's awareness. It's being intentional. There was something I was doing, just the other day. There was something that had to do with money, and I was like, I actually never made clear what I wanted to happen in this situation. Like I was, or how much, I think it was how much money. Like I was clear about what I wanted.
Was that when I talked to you, I asked you about the retreat?
No, I was clear about that.
Yeah, you were.
No, like it was about, like selling something a while ago, and it didn't totally and I went through some other processes. I was doing some things like, again, just the work I always do, not trying to fix anything. And it became really clear. I was like, oh, you never decided what would feel really good here or exactly how much money you wanted from this.
Right.
And you just, I had missed that part. And I'm like, oh, but like I was saying like no to things that didn't feel good, but I hadn't identified what would feel good. And I'm like, oh, how did you miss that? You know? And so it's just like, and that's what we're talking about, like higher level awareness. Like you might not see that. And years ago that would have looked different, or I would have been aware of something else. You know, the awareness would look different. But just like back to basics is being clear about what you want. You know, really ask, not thinking you know what you want, right? Because I think very often we're like, oh, I already know I want XYZ, right? Or I already know I want my business to make money and have fun. But like, oh, but have I really said, like, what is that lately? What's the clarity of that? What do I mean?
And also every time you even say that to yourself, you're activating that. You're strengthening that within you. There's no, if you ever like, oh yeah, I already know what I want. That's a great catch to say, I'm not taking this moment. It can be this moment only to activate it. Instead, the energy of I already know what I want. That's not really energy that's going to get you closer. Saying, yeah, I want this and this and this is going to get you closer, no matter how many times you've said that.
Yes.
You're using the power of the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so much stronger every time you say it, right? Versus I already know.
Yeah. Versus I already
and
know,
own it. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I want this. I want this, you know? Yeah.
And I think another big part of all of what we're talking about today in terms of the same things don't always work as you grow is this is why it's so important that you have to pay attention to what you're called to as you grow and be able to say, so when I started out making lists about these things and that felt really good and I felt, you know, that got me to that next place, and then that's normal. Like now I walk through my days and I feel appreciation for so many things. I don't need to be making those lists to draw my attention there. And actually this happens a lot, is that becomes normal for people. Then something goes wrong in their life, they're like, oh, I better go start making those lists again. Not always what you need. So paying attention to what you need in that moment. What are you being called to within you at that place you're at? Not what you did, not necessarily what you did before. So if you are looking back and questioning, maybe I need to do that, or I should go do that. Firstly, you guys know if it's a should, it's not, you're not there yet. It's not inspired. But tune in and ask yourself, is that what I need? Versus saying, maybe I should go back and do that.
Yes. Yeah, so that's such a good, like, I'm just thinking, like, how many people, because I see that so often, it's like when something goes wrong, we go back to the things instead of, like, like, how am I being called to become more and make a different choice rather than go do all the work? Like, in this moment, how am I being able to choose what I want instead of going back and have to make it clear, right? Yeah. Which is so funny because people will say that, right? Like, well, I don't want, or like, this is going to be a silly example, but it's like, oh, I like, I don't know, blue popsicles. And someone asked me, do I want a blue or a red popsicle? Like, I need to go make a list that I love blue popsicles. No, you just need to choose the blue like, don't get offended or upset that the red was a choice. Like, choose what you want.
Yeah. Exactly. That is a silly but great example. Just choose what you want. Just because options are coming to you, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Just keep Yes. God, sorry. Options are always going to come. And I have been really, and even again, I caught myself in this in a different situation the other day, and I like got mad. Like I put something in, it was this popsicle example, but I put something and I'm like, no, that's not an option. And I'm like, oh, don't get mad that like they offered that. Just say no. Like the answer's no. That's
don't
awesome.
Get mad.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add to before we wrap up?
I mean, I do want to say that this is where a coach helps you.
Because they can see it, different perspective.
They can see it. Yeah. They can see that you're trying to go backwards, or you're trying to make it happen again. And I think, if you've ever felt like, oh, I get stuck for long periods of time, it might be also an option to like, how else can I grow? And maybe a coach is the answer, because they can get you out of those places a lot faster.
Yeah. I had a client just last week saying like, okay, so this didn't happen, you know, another thing didn't pan out the way I thought it would. It was in relationships. And she's like, so, you know, should I go back and do this? I'm like, nope, just keep letting go. Just keep letting go. You're good. You're good. This is all right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Go be awesome.
Thank you for joining us on the Manifest It Now show, where you learn how to leverage the law of attraction to manifest your dreams. Now that you're inspired, share the love and review us on iTunes. While you're there, remember to subscribe.